Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Donald Trump meets Vladimir Putin. Now, that alone was enough to dominate headlines last week, but then Trump's picked up the phone and calls Alexander Lukashenko. No State Department, no diplomats, no intermediaries. Just a direct line from the American president to Europe's last dictator, with Belarus's political prisoners suddenly on the table. For years, Washington barely remembered Belarus existed, except maybe as a trivia answer about borders and dictatorships. But suddenly, Minsk is back on the map. For Moscow, it's an unwelcome complication. For the West, it's a reminder that Belarus is a pressure point in the wider struggle for Europe. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Donald Trump has been conversing with more controversial figures than just Vladimir Putin. He has also been in touch with Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko. The US president called Lukashenko a well-known dictator, quote, highly respected, but said that he is working on the release of 1,300 prisoners. The Lukashenko regime has become notorious for jailing opposition activists and politicians, especially in the wake of the 2020 presidential elections, which have not been recognized by many Western countries due to allegation of rigging by Lukashenko's government. The Belarusian president himself claims that these are not political prisoners, despite there being evidence of the contrary.
You say we have hundreds of people in prison. But if we talk about this so-called opposition that you mentioned, it has nothing to do with political opposition. These are people who have spoken out against the state.
Some prisoners have already been released, recently 16 according to Trump's latest post on Truth Social. In the past, prominent figures such as former presidential candidate Sergei Tikhanovsky were released from prison.
President Trump now has the power and opportunity to free all political prisoners in Belarus with a single word. And I ask him to do so, to say that word.
The main issue with Trump's acknowledgement of Lukashenko, according to observers, is that for the last 5 years, US leadership met with opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and therefore presented her as a legitimate representative of Belarus. By conversing with and striking deals with Minsk, Trump may have just changed the dynamic of Belarusian politics.
And now, let's zone in on the East-Planning portion of our show. Nobel Prize winners are urging U.S. President Donald Trump to keep on pressuring Minsk to release political prisoners. Reports indicate that as many as 1,300 people may still be held by the Lukashenko regime.
19 Nobel Prize winners have signed an open letter in which they urge Donald Trump to maintain pressure on the Minsk regime to release the political prisoners it is currently holding. They also called for the dropping of illegal and politically motivated prosecutions of individuals who had to flee Belarus in the wake of the 2020 presidential elections, and the following crackdown on opposition figures and activists. The letter thanked Trump for his conversation with Alexander Lukashenko, in which he raised the issue of the political prisoners and facilitated the release of some of them. Dmitry Bolkunets, an exiled Belarusian opposition activist, believes the phone call came as a response to his email to President Trump in which he asked him to raise the issue during his meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, given the close ties between Putin and Lukashenko. He also says Belarusian activists intend to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize should he help secure the release of the prisoners. Donald Trump has seemingly been coveting the prestigious award, as on several occasions he had underlined his effort as a peacemaker, such as his claim of having ended 6 wars.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. And to understand why this matters, let's rewind. Belarus today is a country where dissent is criminalized, where journalists vanish into prisons, and where Nobel laureates like Ales Bialiatski have spent years behind bars. Over 1,300 political prisoners are still held across the country. Human rights groups call it Europe's most severe political crackdowns since the Balkan Wars. Families are broken, 500,000 Belarusians have fled abroad, and yet Lukashenko has clung to power by weaponizing repression and leaning ever deeper on Russia. For years, activists have begged the West to pressure Minsk. A year ago, 35 Nobel laureates urged Lukashenko to free prisoners. He ignored them. Then 40 laureates appealed to Trump himself, asking him to intervene. That too went nowhere, at least not at the time. But when the prospect of a Putin-Trump meeting emerged this summer, activists saw an opening. If Trump pressed Putin, perhaps the Russian leader would toss him a cheap concession, a call to Lukashenko, a handful of releases, something to show Trump's diplomacy delivering results. So, letters were sent. Appeals were drafted, and on the day Trump flew to Anchorage to meet Putin, one such letter landed in his inner circle. Hours later, the call was made, and here's where things get interesting. Trump didn't follow the script. He didn't ask Putin to intercede with Minsk. He didn't frame it as a US-Russia concession swap. He called Lukashenko directly, asserting himself as the dealmaker-in-chief. For Lukashenko, the calculation is right there. He craves legitimacy, yet risks alienating Moscow if it appears too cozy with Washington. And for many Belarusians, especially the families of prisoners, even the possibility of release offers hope that they haven't had in years. Still, let's not get carried away. Without guarantees, there's no certainty prisoners will actually walk free. Lukashenko has made promises before, only to renege once the spotlight has faded. Now, will this actually deliver results? That's the ultimate test. Even if a fraction of Belarus's political prisoners are released, it will be a humanitarian victory. If 1,300 are freed, it will transform the narrative. But there's always a chance that nothing happens. This is the first time in years Belarus's political prisoners have broken through into the center of US-Russian diplomacy. For once, Minsk wasn't just a footnote to Moscow. So here we are, Trump, Putin, and Lukashenko, three men bound together by global power dynamics. It's a reminder that in today's geopolitics, breakthroughs don't always come from strategy papers or policy summits. Sometimes they come from a single, unexpected phone call. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Valery Tsepalko, former Belarusian ambassador to the United States, as well as former candidate for president of Belarus. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So today we're trying to pick apart this phone call between Donald Trump and Lukashenko. And of course, a lot of people have been calling for him to negotiate the release of political prisoners. But on the other end, we're also seeing a risk of legitimizing the Lukashenko regime. What's your read on the phone call, and where do you stand on this conversation?
Well, first of all, I would like to tell you a little bit of the prehistory of this call. About half a year ago, we mobilized Nobel Prize laureates, and they wrote a letter to Lukashenko to release political prisoners, to express the humanitarian aspect of this issue. But definitely Lukashenko didn't respond, taken also into consideration that one of the Nobel Peace Prize laureates still in Belarus prison. In February this year, is the joint letter of 75 Nobel Prize laureates, also with the request to put his efforts to release political prisoners. But at that time, it was just the inauguration of Donald Trump, and he had a lot of other issues, so probably this letter remained unnoticed. But when he was flying to Alaska to meet Putin, we wrote the third letter, and we asked him to raise this issue with Putin, because for Putin to make a decision and to release Belarus political prisoners is like just as easy as a click on a notebook. Because Lukashenko completely is dependent on Russia, on the Kremlin. But this time, Donald Trump, and by the way, we promised also to support consideration of Donald Trump for Nobel Peace Prize, which is in the highest priority for the White House currently, as you probably know. And Donald Trump, instead of asking Putin to release 300 political prisoners, he made a decision to make a direct phone call to Lukashenko, because he does like someone to be an intimidator, and instead he wanted him to be an intimidator, and if he could solve the issue directly, so he decided to pick up a receiver and make a phone call. So this phone call appeared to be absolutely unexpectedly to anyone, and we had a consultation with the US State Department and with the US Embassy in Minsk, and this phone call was completely unexpected also. And just when they were flying on the plane, and his assistant, well, they were in a very, very short distance to him. It's not in a normal situation when they need, just to overcome certain bureaucratic barriers in order to reach the president. In their plane, they reached him immediately. And that's how this phone call appeared. Does it mean the legitimization of Lukashenko? I don't think so, because it didn't mean that Lukashenko is the president. It didn't mean that the US or Western countries would recognize him as the president. However, it's a recognition, and it's very clear for everyone that he's the person who takes a decision. So we can call Belarus current Belarus leader as Hamas. It means that even negotiations with Hamas takes place if certain decisions can be taken and if they can solve any problems.
Now, do you think that Trump's kind of going off script when it comes to, instead of calling Putin, going to Lukashenko, has changed the calculations from these attempts at getting political prisoners freed in any way?
Well, if Kremlin now wants to please Trump, they can follow Trump's footsteps and ask Lukashenko release political prisoners, because these people, they don't mean anything for the so as a matter of fact, yesterday we published also the appeal of Nobel laureates who supported, in fact, this initiative of Donald Trump and him to continue the efforts and not to stop only on the release of political prisoners, but also to close criminal cases against all politically motivated cases that would create a foundation for the return of about 500,000 Belarusians to their homeland, which is a great catastrophe. Just for the country of 9 million people, 500,000 people, the most active, educated, talented, capable people that left the country, is a big tragedy for the country. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. And if these political prisoners will be released, if all the criminal cases, politically motivated criminal cases, will also be eliminated from the people that are abroad, then, it can be the first consolation, and that's what we would like to see in Belarus.
Now, a week ago, Belarusian attempts at restoring relations with Minsk has been rebuffed by the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, what's your take on that?
Well, we also addressed the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs, but before, like probably half a year ago, I don't remember exactly what time it was, we addressed a letter to the President Duda, and with the initiative of ultimatum. It means that if Polish political prisoners, journalists, first of all, will not be released, but also Belarus political prisoners, Poland can shut down the border with transit for the European goods Chinese goods that are moving to the European Union, which would cost nothing for Poland. And I think that this issue was raised during the visit of the Polish president to China, because the issue is about Chinese goods. So that was, in fact, the attempts that were made by Polish government at that time. But again, there are two issues that are in Belarus. The first issue is to recognize Lukashenko as a legitimate president, that I think this step should not be taken. The first step is to recognize him as a person who makes unilateral decisions inside the country, and whose political will be to release political prisoners and stop criminal persecution of political opponent, then can be the issue that he can solve.
Now, Belarus has recently been on a diplomatic push, and today we see Iranian President Pezeshkian visiting Minsk. where do you see that this diplomatic thaw originating from?
Well, just the countries like rock states, they normally attach to each other. And that's, democracies are close to democracies. Countries normally try to develop relations with those who share the same values with them. So it's quite understandable that democratic countries, they, have better relations with themselves, try to support autocracies because even despite the fact they don't like each other, just their value is that the leadership should be formed without the participation of the people. So it's a nightmare for them to see the people who choose the leadership. And this is the reason, just they try to help each other. And this is the reason why Lukashenko now hosts Pashinyan, I cannot pronounce, correctly, the name of the Iranian president in Minsk.
And last but not least, do you think that Belarus might be eyeing a diplomatic reset with the West?
Well, it's a long way, I think, but one thing, if we can stop humanitarian catastrophe, if the criminal cases will be closed, if a political dialogue will be launched, then I think it can create or recreate conditions for the restoration, at least diplomatic restorations with the Western countries.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you. Have a great day.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Russia has returned the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers back to Ukraine. The identity of some of the fallen troops have led to backlash from Kyiv.
Ukraine received the bodies as part of an exchange of fallen soldiers agreed upon during the Istanbul summits between Russia and Ukraine earlier this year. The soldiers who were returned to Ukraine had fought in the Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Luhansk regions, as well as some who had perished during Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk region. Ukrainian authorities have raised concerns, however, that among the corpses were 5 soldiers who had died in captivity. This is despite these troops having been listed as heavily wounded and seriously ill prisoners of war who were to be exchanged. Russia has reportedly been dragging its feet when it comes to prisoner exchanges, despite previous agreements. Ukraine continues to demand the return of its soldiers, especially those who are in dire condition.
According to Reuters, Hungary could become a host of the potential summit between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. Despite pressure from Washington, however, Russia has been hesitant to agree to such a meeting.
An anonymous source within the US administration says that possible talks between Zelensky and Putin could take place in Hungary. Budapest is not party to the International Criminal Court, so would not have to arrest Putin would he land in the country. On the other hand, the Hungarian government is seen as pro-Russian and has maintained ties with the Russian government despite condemnation. Other European leaders, such as Emmanuel Macron, believe a neutral country should be selected for the talks, such as Switzerland. Moscow itself, however, has not said it agrees to such a meeting. Russia's foreign minister has gone on record to say that the talks should come gradually and go through, quote, all necessary stages. He did not, however, reject the idea of face-to-face talks entirely.
The Russian government is continuing its campaign of indoctrinating its youth. Several Russian regions are introducing mandatory patriotic lessons in schools and preschools.
At least 100 preschools in Russia and in several parts of occupied Ukraine will be introducing state-backed patriotic lessons, according to the Russian Ministry of Education. This is a special program backed by Vladimir Putin himself that was introduced in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. These lessons are meant to allegedly instill patriotic values at an early age. These supposed values include, quote, respect for Russian culture and history, as well as even more nebulous terms such as kindness and honesty. The program's critics have denounced it as political indoctrination. In several cases, children have been dressed up in full military uniform and given toy weapons.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.